Both of them listened to my stomach, looked at the other one and kind of went, and then they turned to me and they said, yeah, so we hear something, so, I would prepare yourself kind of thing. And then they took me to hospital, stuck me in a room with a concussion, going, okay, hi, you exist. I guess we're having you. But obviously also knowing that I'd been drinking like a fish. This baby is not going to be okay. This is not going to come out okay. That was probably one of the biggest headaches I've ever had in my life. It's not necessarily you have children or you're a loser and you've wasted your life and you're going to live in shame and regret forever. I think we are moving out of that society, thank God. So hello, you wonderful citizen of cyberspace, and welcome to a video about being child-free at 40 and how I feel about that now, which really is a bit of a video for anyone who is like I was, in or around your 20s. You're pretty damn sure you don't want to have kids and you're never going to want kids, but you've got people coming at you from all sides saying, oh, but you will change your mind, you're going to grow out of it, you'll mature, you'll have children, you'll regret it if you don't. And then the really weird one, which is like, you're not going to have children. That is so selfish. How is it selfish? Who is it selfish to decide I have mental health issues? I don't want to genetically pass on those mental health issues and make some poor kid miserable with them. Climate change is making the future very, very doomy. Like, I don't know. I don't know whether some people believe that anyone with a uterus is surrounded by these little baby souls that are like, birth me, birth me, birth me. And if you deny them, they're not getting a shot at life, and it's terribly selfish from that perspective. Like, speaking for myself, I don't recall ever asking to be born. I don't recall being a little fetus bobbling around my mother begging for a chance at life. And I have to say, I have not really enjoyed the human experience to date. So I think it is probably one of the most unselfish things you can do to weigh up your personal situation and go, there are so many reasons that I could not give a child a happy life. I'm not going to do it. And I really feel like everyone who does decide to have children should think not just on their own personal circumstances and whether they can give a child a happy life, but also the other millions of possibilities of things you could do with your life. Like it kind of, maybe this is a bit of a neurodiverse take on child rearing, but it seems so strange to me that most neurotypical people just see the path of life unfurling in front of them as a series of standard choices that, you get to a certain age, you put down childish things, you get a job, you get a house, you get married, you have babies. That's how it goes. There is no deviation. They don't think to themselves, all the money that a child costs and all the time and effort that a child is going to take from your life. You could write a book, you could write a play, you could write a screenplay, you could go traveling for years and years and years, you could do another degree, you could become brilliant at anything, you could have a new career, you could move to another country, you could do all of these millions of things with your life that are just as rich and interesting and diverse as having a child. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to walk down this path just because it's the path that everyone walks down. You don't have to do that. And I feel like not enough people consider that. The regretful parents subreddit is absolutely mind-blowing. And if you've never seen any of the stories on regretful parents, it's basically people anonymously talking about how much they regret having kids. Some of them, they've had children and they weren't expecting them to have severe disabilities. Some of them, they've had their partner leave and they've ended up doing it themselves, even though they never expected that. And it's really hard going. Some of them, they wanted children. They thought they wanted it more than anything in the world. They really thought they'd love it. And it's been knock and blow after knock and blow. And they've just found it harder and harder and harder. And they hate every minute of it. Some of them have really difficult children who just seem to hate them no matter what they do. There are so many reasons that people regret having children. And I think people who regret not having children, like, yeah, that's going to suck and that's going to be painful, but there's a lot of ways you can have children in your life. If you've got siblings, if you've got cousins, if you've got friends who've got children, you can babysit those children, you can be a part of those children's lives. Or you can go into a career in like working in a nursery or in a primary school or something if you want to be around children. But I think if you have children and then you regret it, there's no getting away from that. And these people, usually women, because obviously it's so much easier for guys to get away from children they've had than the mom usually. So it's usually women who are really in the trenches when they've had children and they can't get away from them, and it's taken over their whole life. And, you know, there's people I've heard speak on TikTok who wanted children, planned for children. They love their children. They love being a mother. But at the same time, they're saying, if I had my life again, I would not do this, and I would advise against doing it, because I can see everything that I was, every single thing that I loved about me and that I was proud of about me. I can see it just drifting away, and I'm losing it. I'm losing the person I was, and I'm just becoming someone's mom, and I'm having to take a backseat, and all of my dreams and all of my hopes, I'm not going to get them back until I'm, you know, in my 60s, 70s, depending how things go. Like, it's a big sacrifice, whoever you are and however much you want it. But to speak of my own kind of trajectory with deciding not to have kids, like, for the most part, I knew from a very young age that I wasn't going to have kids and that I didn't have any interest in them. But there have been wobbles along that journey. There have been times that I've either been open to kids or that I have actually really desperately wanted kids. But overall, I am very, very glad that I kind of wised up and came back to my basic core principles around, no, it's not for me, and it would not be right for me. That even when I was like a very young child, I did not play with dolls. I did not play with baby dolls. I never had any interest in like play acting the mom role. That was just never for me, even as a child. And then for a long time, I think mostly in my 20s, I really strongly disliked children. Like, I could not see the appeal for anyone. They just seemed very, very sticky, very gooey, very loud. And all I could see was the sacrifice. And I have to say, I do see children in quite a different way now that I've got, you know, friends and family members who do have young children. I have started to see that the appeal, some of them do seem very nice. I've realized that they vary as much as adults. You know, that there are some children who are very difficult children, let's put it that way. And then you get other children who are kind of much friendlier and much easier and quieter to be around. And I think one thing that's kind of been a bit of a turning point in how I see children is that I've recently gained my first like blood relation nephew, because although I have a lot of siblings, most of my siblings are step siblings. So although it's been lovely to see them having children and to meet their children and everything, they're not blood related to me. And I've realized it's very interesting how differently children seem to respond to you and how you seem to respond to children when there's actually like a blood tie there. I don't know whether it's something in the pheromones or whether it's something just in like recognizing yourself in this child. Like I always used to think that was quite an egotistical thing, the people who would say, oh, but it's different when it's your own child, or like, oh, I could only love my own child. I used to think that was so egotistical, like what you could only love a child if it had your face. But actually, it's very interesting when you do meet a child that looks, because for a long time, this child looked like the spitting image of my brother when he was little. So it was like a flashback to having my brother as a child all over again. And then there was a period where this kid looked exactly like me as a child. And that honestly was quite upsetting. I really found that kind of disturbing and upsetting, because I was like, you are so innocent and so sweet and so happy. And yet you look, it's like seeing myself reborn and thinking of all the shit that I had to go through in life and all the shit that inevitably anyone is going to go through in life, and seeing this little innocent you reborn and knowing they're going to be broken by the world is one of the most upsetting things. So that I think that there is a much more intrinsic, instinctive need and desire to protect and love a child that somehow has your genetics. It's weird, and I feel hypocritical about this. I really do, because as I say, I grew up in a step family. I was in a step family from the age of about 2, so all of my memories are of being in a step family, and to my mind that is my family, and I've never known anything different. So it's almost like a bit of an adoption scenario. I feel like a huge hypocrite in saying that I now realize there is this difference when a child is genetically tied to you, when you can see yourself in it. It's very weird, but yeah, the way you feel when you see a child that literally looks like it could be your child, it's a very brain spinning thing. And this child is so lovely. Literally the first picture of this baby when he was born, he looks so appalled and so disgusted by the whole wide world. I've never seen such a clear expression of disgust and horror on the face of like a newborn who's been in the world for like an hour. Wild. He's a fascinating little man, and he has really changed my opinion on children. Get away from me. Like, no, he's lovely, and I really love him a lot. Does he make me want one of my own? Absolutely not, no. But I'm very glad that I get to have him in my life. And I will say another thing that really helps, if you're someone, particularly if you're neurodiverse in any way, particularly autistic, and you really hate children, get some loop earplugs or some decent earplugs. Wear those earplugs next time you are around children. I swear to God, that has made such a difference to me. I didn't even realize it was the pitch and the volume of their speaking voices that does my head in so much, but it really is. When I put in my loops, suddenly my anxiety and my irritation just goes down, and I can actually be around children. I can enjoy them. It doesn't matter if they're like smashing train sets over each other's head and screaming. I'm not bothered suddenly. It was literally just the volume and the pitch of their voices grating on me that was a huge part of, I can't stand children. But yeah, for most of my life, I was like, no, children are not for me, for more and more and more reasons as the years went by. As I got my autism diagnosis, as I got my ADHD diagnosis, as some of the children in my family have turned out to also have ADHD, and seeing how difficult they can be and thinking, yeah, that's just an ADHD child. You're an ADHD autism crossover. And if you had a kid, the best case scenario really is that it has what you have on the same level that you have it, which is miserable. My childhood in general, not because it was generally a bad childhood, but just because of what I have going on, was not really a happy time. And I would not want to inflict that on someone else. And then there's the very real possibility that I could have a profoundly nonverbal autistic child, and I would not cope with that. Like, my best friend at primary school had a profoundly autistic nonverbal brother, and you've got to be so strong. And you've really got to have, I think, a deep love for children and for caring and for, so much stuff that is just not a part of my DNA. If you're going to raise like a profoundly autistic kid, it's a whole thing. And I could not take that risk personally. So as I've learned these things about myself, that I have these conditions and all of that, it has really compounded my, having children not for me. But round about when I was 19 to 21, I was pretty chill and pretty open to the idea of having kids. That it may partly be that one of my boyfriends around that time, we never discussed having children, but it was very clear that he wanted them and that he would just not be happy in life until he had kids. He was about 8 years older than me, so he was kind of moving into a whole different life arena than I was. Like, I wasn't really into the idea of having kids, but I was kind of like, well, if it happens with him, then I guess it happens with him. Maybe when I'm older, if we're still together, I could see it happening. And to be fair, probably if we had have stayed together, I probably would have ended up having kids with him, and I think it would have been a disaster. So I'm very glad, to be honest, that we did go our separate ways, and he is now doing the whole kids thing with someone else and doing such a great job of it, and it's lovely to see. So I think that worked out perfectly for everyone involved, really. But there was one time during this era that I had a fuck buddy relationship with someone, and we ended up having unprotected sex one night because I was on the pill. I forgot to take my pill. And the minute I got on Google and put in, I've missed the first pill of my pack, what do I do? It told me that the first pill of the pack is the really dangerous one to miss. That if you're going to get pregnant from missing one pill, back the pills that I was taking anyway, the first pill of the pack was the one to not miss, and that was the one I'd missed, and I'd had unprotected sex. So I went to the pharmacy to get a morning after pill. They told me it was going to be £25. I was like 19, 20 at the time. That seemed like a lot of money to me, and I was like, I'll go to a clinic, I'll get one for free. I couldn't find the clinic, so I just went, oh sod it, it'll be fine. I'll just see what happens next month. I'll probably get my period. If I don't, I guess I'm having a baby. Over £25. Like, my mum not only would have lent me that money, she would have thrown that money at me not to have a baby at the age of 19, 20 with a guy I wasn't even with. But no, I was so chill about the whole thing that I just gambled on it. And for a month, I had no idea. And I remember kind of turning it over in my head and thinking, wow, so I guess like in a month, it might turn out that I'm pregnant. I might end up having this baby. And you know, as I said, I wasn't even with the guy. I didn't really have any intention of being with the guy. Like, I liked him, but I didn't like him that much. And yeah, I could just see myself doing the whole kid thing. And what a lack of frontal lobe, immature brain fart of a moment. Fortunately, I got my period. I did not get pregnant, thank God. And a few years after that, when I stopped taking birth control, I actually didn't get a single period for about 6 years after I came off birth control. And that gave me the strong belief that my eating disorder had rendered me infertile, because, you know, I was back up to a reasonable weight. I was eating, I wasn't on birth control, and yet my period hadn't come in years and years. And at this point, me being the contrary little dickhead that I am, I was suddenly so devastated about the fact that I couldn't have kids. I remember specifically one day queuing up in the local shop to get a coffee, and there was this dad in front of me with this little boy of about 2 years old, and he had this boy on his shoulder. So the kid was like in front of me, like facing me, and he was just the cutest little kid. And he was like pulling faces at me, and I was pulling faces back at him. And then this voice in the back of my brain goes, "You're never going to have one of those." And I fucking burst into tears. I had to put my coffee down and just leave the shop. I was so upset. I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to have that. Like, all of that. And all these like cheesy Hallmark moments of like, oh my God, but like Christmas Day with the kids and all of that. Like, you're never going to have that. That choice has just been taken off of your plate, and you're never going to have that. You know, announcing your pregnancy to people, all these like cheesy romantic comedy moments that you see that honestly are like such a small part of the reality of children. Like, it's not this Hallmark moment. It's, you know, it's sick, and it's nappies, and it's driving them all over the place, and it's heartache, and it's stress, and getting sick, and everyone in the house getting sick, and having a cold for 2 years because children are germ factories when they go to school. All these horrible things, these Hallmark moments of, you know, announcing your pregnancy to your mom and all of this is such a small part of it. But all of that shit just went through my mind, and I was like, you're never going to have that. And I am really contrary. Like, reverse psychology is a huge thing to me. Like, if there's something that I think I can't have, I will immediately want it. And if there's something that I can have, not bothered. And that was exactly how it went with this, that I was so upset, constantly upset for a while about the fact that I, you know, couldn't have children. And then my periods came back, and everything seemed to be fine. As far as I know, everything is fine. And immediately I was like, what the fuck was I smoking? Why would I ever want children? I've never wanted children. Why did you get your knickers in such a twist about having children? But anyway, I did. And then, of all the dysfunctional periods in my dysfunctional life, 2017, when I was drinking 40 units a day, this was like the number one period that I absolutely should not even have been thinking about having children. But unfortunately, a lot of crappy stuff happened in my life all at once, including a major pregnancy scare. That I'd been taken in an ambulance to hospital because, to cut a long waffle short, I think I had a concussion. I don't know to this day entirely what happened, but from God knows what drunken antics, I could barely string a sentence together for about 2 to 3 months after this night. No one bothered scanning my head because it was just like, look, you're drunk. Even though I could barely speak for 2 months, it was just like, oh, you're drunk, ignore it. But while I was in the ambulance, because I'd gained all this weight from drinking, they took one look at me and they went, are you pregnant? And I said, well, I don't think I am, but I haven't had a period because drinking that much screws up your periods. So they said, well, you could be pregnant. And they listened to my stomach in the back of the ambulance, and both of these fucking paramedics listened to my stomach and kind of looked at the other one and kind of went, and then they turned to me and they said, yeah, so we hear something, you know, you haven't had a period. You said you've had sex in the last however long. You haven't had a period. We both hear something. So, you know, I would prepare yourself, kind of thing. So that they basically told me, yeah, we're like 90% sure you're pregnant. And then they took me to hospital, stuck me in a room with a concussion, having just been told, yeah, you're probably pregnant. And I knew the last time I'd had sex, and it was like a while ago, as in it would have been too long to get an abortion. So at that point, I'm in a room going, okay, hi, you exist. I guess we're having you. But obviously also knowing that I'd been drinking like a fish. This baby is not going to be okay. This is not going to come out okay. That was probably one of the biggest head fucks I've ever had in my life. And it was about half an hour, 45 minutes before a nurse ducked her head around the corner, having piss tested me on arrival, and said, you're not pregnant. And I was just like, thank God. But on the inside, I was so depressed. Because I swear, it does do something to you. It really does, particularly if you're like drunk, concussed, confused, and then someone springs that on you and leaves you alone in a room with what you believe to be an unborn child that you know you have messed up with your lifestyle. That is an enormous head fuck. And I think added to that was also the promise of your life being different. That, you know, when you're a huge alcoholic, you would do anything to get out of that, but somehow you can't stop drinking. And then someone presents you with the possibility of a completely different life. And you imagine, if that baby had been real, I would have had to get help. I would have had to get sober. And there would have been this whole different life. There would have been a baby. It would have been completely different. My life would have changed. And again, you know, you bring out all these hallmark moments, these cheesy, like, oh, your life could be so different. You blah, 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 blah. And like say, I was concussed as fuck for like 2 months after that. And I got so hung up on this, because honestly, it felt like I had been pregnant and like I had lost it. That was how it felt to me. Like I remember picking out a name, really thinking about if I want this, I've kind of got to put myself on track for this. And do I want this? And I was just so upset about the whole thing for ages. And then I think when the concussion wore off, certainly when I managed to quit drinking a few months later, I did pop out of that again. And I was like, what the fuck were you smoking? Like, why would you? We know that having a baby is not for us. We do not want this. And also, again, you'd been drinking like a fish. It was a blessing that you were not pregnant. Like, if you had been, that baby would have been so messed up. It would have been a disaster, and you would have felt guilty for the whole of its life. So those are kind of the times in my life really that I have had wobbles about it, that it has usually been when there has been some sort of exterior factor, whereas whenever I'm like healthy and in my right mind, I know that I don't want it. So having wound up at 40 with no kid is a huge blessing to me, particularly, as I say, the more I hear on TikTok about birth stories and postnatal depression, postnatal psychosis. I have to say, all my life I've been fascinated by birth stories, because to me it's on par with like skydiving or swimming with sharks. Like they're all things that scare me shitless and that I would never do. So I'm fascinated by them, because I think people who do any of these things, whether that's skydiving, whether that's swimming with sharks, or whether that's giving birth, I think you are such a badass. The lack of control in giving birth, like, you know, the fact that what happens is going to happen and plans always go awry, and whatever you're planning, it's not going to go that way. The pure lack of control, the pain. I mean, I remember when I was quite young, my stepmom telling me that when she had her second child, partway through the labor, she was just so overwhelmed by the pain and the exhaustion. She said she got up and she tried to just leave. She was like, look, I'm not doing this tonight. I'm tired and I'm sick of this. I'll come back tomorrow. I'll do it then. And they just had to like force her back on the bed and say, I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that. You know, she was just looped out on gas and air and exhaustion. She was just like, I'm going home. I'll do this tomorrow. It's like, no, you can't do that. You've got to do it now. I'm sorry, it's happening, and it's happening now. Oh, terrifying. I think you are such a badass if you've ever given birth, like cesarean, natural, any of it. I think you are an incredible badass. You know, the pregnancy, like to me, even like the 9 months of complete sobriety, of not being on a lot of medication that I need to be on, the whole thing is just such an Iron Man challenge. And I don't think society, particularly male society, recognizes pregnancy and birth as such a battle as it really is. Like it's a huge thing. So I do find it fascinating. And like, you know, there have been people in my life, I will say, who had always been quite similar to me, and that they'd never wanted children. They'd never really seen themselves as a maternal type. And then in their late 30s, they had fallen pregnant and kind of gone, oh, okay, well, is this going to happen? We can either do this now, or I guess it's never going to happen. And they went the having children route. And I think they found it kind of hard to adapt initially, because it hadn't 100% been their plan. It hadn't been how they saw themselves. It was like a big shift. But eventually they really blossomed into the mom role, and now have more than one child and seem to be loving every moment of it. So it's really interesting when you get to this point in life and you do see the different directions that people go, you know. And some people, you know, I've got another friend who I think had always planned on having children, but it hadn't really worked out that way. And eventually she went the sperm donor route and decided, look, you know, I want this, I'm going to do it myself. And I remember she was really on the fence for a long time about, like, what am I going to regret more? Am I going to regret the hard work of being a single mom, or am I going to regret, you know, not trying and not having this child and not doing it? For me, I would far rather regret not having a child than regret having a child. But for her, it had always been a big part of what she wanted in life. And you could see she was going to kick herself forever if she didn't go for it. So even though she has had, you know, so many exhausting, awful nights being, you know, everything to this child, doing it completely alone, I think she's really happy with her decision. I think, you know, having this toddler now, so it's really interesting to see the different routes people go. And obviously at my age as well, you've got a lot of friends who unfortunately are getting divorced, you know, and have had children with this man that they thought they could love and trust, and, you know, they thought they had it made and they thought they had everything going for them. And then these guys have just bombshelled their lives apart, and now, you know, it's all the classic tropes of awfulness, you know, the father using the children as weapons against them and kicking them out of the family home. And you know, and it's so painful when you've been in that situation as a kid yourself, and you've been the child of divorce, and then suddenly you get to this age and you see couples that you saw them get married, and you saw how excited they were to get married, you saw how excited they were to have children, and now suddenly they're getting divorced, and you're seeing those children that you've watched grow up walk the path that you walked as the children of divorce. It is really weird. Like, much as I have not really enjoyed the process of being human and living this long, it is fascinating when you get to see the cyclic nature of life and all the experiences that you had and the things you thought about adults, and then you get there and you realize there are no adults, that no one really is an adult. Like, your younger siblings are suddenly parents, or people who are your friends, and you've gone to their parties when they were like coked off their tits. You've seen them in a K-hole crawling around the floor thinking they were a whale, and you know, now they're trying to be a responsible adult with babies and stuff, and it's so weird. And you think, my God, my parents were just like that too. They were just these struggling kids who didn't know what they were doing with a baby. And it's so weird trying to picture that. And I think it will be equally interesting, you know, if I live to be 60, 70, and you get to be that point where people are having grandbabies, you know, your friends are having grandbabies, and it's going to be a whole other thing when you get to see that double looping of life. But yeah, relating to children and the whole subject of this video, I do enjoy having, you know, the free time and the mental energy to go, oh, I have an idea for writing, or oh, I have an idea for a video, and to be able to just get on with it and not have to plan everything around a small person, or to be fair, by now at the age of 40, I don't know how old, any child I had would be. Maybe they would be a teenager by now and they would be getting on with their own stuff, but I don't have to plan all my shit around someone else. Similarly, if there's something I see online that I think is beautiful, I can basically just buy it, and I don't have to think, oh, but I've got to buy this and this and this and this and this for the kid, and the kid's growing out of shoes and blah, 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 blah. You do just get to live your life for yourself. And I guess, is that why people call it selfish to not have children? Because you're kind of living for yourself? Maybe so. But I think when you're someone who can barely take care of themselves, I think it's not really selfish to live that way. I think it would be tremendously selfish to inflict my absolute chaos on a small human being who was fully reliant on me. When I can barely fucking feed and take care of myself, I can't be responsible for someone else. And as I say, when you see your friends going through divorces and things too, and bankruptcies and stuff like that, and you have periods of your own life where you've budgeted horribly and you are absolutely broke for the next X amount of weeks, and you think, well, thank God it's only me. It's only me I've got to worry about. And obviously, the being tied to the person you made that baby with, that there are ex-partners I have who I am so tremendously glad that I never got knocked up by them, because the idea of being tied to them perpetually for the rest of our lives by a child. I can't think of many fates that are more awful and confusing than that, because let's face it, we have all got that one ex that we just viscerally are nauseated by now. That person that you want to put on a spaceship and you want to launch them into orbit because you don't even want to walk the same earth as someone who hear their name, and you just flinch because you feel so revolted and you feel so stupid that you ever let someone like that into your life and tolerated them for as long as you did, and all the rest of it, all the rest of that feeling that you get whenever you see someone who looks a little bit like them. So can you imagine having a child with that person, and suddenly in this child that you're trying to love and protect and care for, you're seeing flickers of yourself and your family genetics, but you're also seeing physical and personality flickers of the person who nauseates you more than anyone else on earth. Added to that, they would have loved it if I got pregnant, not because they wanted to have a kid with me, but because it would have made them inescapable. They would have gotten their claws into me and into my family, and I never would have been able to shake them loose. And just the degree to which someone like that can ruin the most precious and amazing experiences of your life. I just can't think of a more confusing, awful fate than seeing them reflected every single day in the face of my own child. Like, that is head fuck, creme de la creme. And the other thing I'd like to add, relating to who you have children with, I think one of the reasons I was born was to try and save my parents' relationship. And unfortunately, my personality, for better and for worse, is very similar to my dad's, I think, in a lot of ways. So if you're the mom in that situation, not only is the relationship going to break down and you're going to be on your own, but you're also potentially going to end up with a mini me of the father. So, whatever character traits you maybe don't so much like in that man, just be aware you can end up with a child that is their mini me. So as far as people saying to you, oh, you're going to change your mind, you're going to mature, you're going to regret it, all of that, I think it is difficult because it's something you can't 100% say at that age. You can't 100% say, yeah, no, I'm not going to change my mind. Yeah, I'm never going to have children, because you don't know if you're going to end up pregnant at some point and then suddenly feel very differently when you're actually in, as I did in that hospital bed when I'd basically been told, yep, you're having a baby. And I suddenly felt very differently about that. And as I say, it screwed with my head for a long time because it did feel like I had something taken away from me. You don't know how you're going to be feeling in that position unless you are put in that position. But I do think if you're someone like me, who even as a child, you had no interest in playing the mom, And as you grow older, you're kind of like, no, I don't like being around children. I don't see what's interesting about them. I don't, I think if you're kind of like that, I think it's pretty likely that you're not going to change your mind. I think it is a bit patronizing and a bit condescending and a bit rude of older people to assume that they know better than a 20-something-year-old knows themselves, and how you feel about children and what you want to do with your body. I think it is becoming more accepted little by little, depending on where you live, that there are more paths in life, and that it's not necessarily you have children or you're a loser and you've wasted your life and you're going to live in shame and regret forever. I think we are moving out of that society, thank God. But I do think there's a lag on that when it comes to anyone with a uterus. That for some reason, men being all about their career and wanting to be CEOs, wanting to be billionaires, wanting to be entrepreneurs, having, big ideas of what they want to do with their job or wanting to travel, that is applauded. That is seen as, oh, he's so adventurous, oh, he's so career focused, oh, he's so ambitious. But, anyone with a uterus has similar desires. It's kind of like, oh, you're going to be a sad, saggy cat lady, and you're going to be full of regret, and you're going to be lonely. And actually, I would say that women usually end up with more supportive friendship groups in middle age than men do. Men tend to lean so hard emotionally on their female partners and on their female friends because they don't get that from their male friends. Whereas women with their friends, there's a lot more supportive chit chat there. There's a lot more of a support network there. I think women ending up lonely is actually less likely than a single man ending up lonely. And I think the fact that we're hearing a lot about the male loneliness epidemic, and yet we're not really hearing much about a female loneliness epidemic, even though I would say there are probably just as many single females out there, you don't hear about them being so lonely and so down about it, which is not a slight against men or women anyway, just an observation that because of the culture around like, oh, men not talking about their emotions so much with their friends, I think loneliness is much more telling on a single man than it is on a single woman. Like, single women tend to find stand-ins for that. If you have cats, you come to love those cats. I'm more of a dog person personally, but I don't have a dog at the moment. So if I ever get lonely, I'll get me a dog. And I love dogs, and I've always loved dogs, to be fair, more than children. So I think I will be very happy with my grumpy looking giant schnauzer or whatever I end up with. So with all of that said, if you are child free or not child free, feel free to drop your thoughts and your story and all of that. Do you have any regrets either way? Feel free to drop that in the comments. And I think I've waffled enough, so thank you for listening. Over and out. Bye bye.